Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, Brett Gibson is our guest. Now, he's an expert in several different aspects of broadcast engineering. One of them is vertical real estate. In fact, we're going to spend some time talking to Brett about from a landlord or a tenant point of view and some of the technical aspects and contractual aspects of vertical real estate. Plus some interesting thoughts on IP connectivity to lots of transmitter sites. That's coming up on TWiRT.
This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics with the Bionic Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Air, featuring Playout One radio automation software, comprehensive streaming solutions, website content management, and social media tools for maximum listener engagement on the web at AIIR.com. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts.
Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to that light bulb at the top of the tower. I'm Kirk Harnack. So glad you've joined us, no matter where you are, what time zone you're in. Chances are you're watching a replay or listening to a replay, since most people don't watch us live. We do the show live on Thursdays at 4 p.m. Central Time, 5 p.m. Eastern, 3 Mountain, 2 Pacific. But you're always welcome to join us live for that. We put the show on Facebook and on YouTube. So, hey, if you go to YouTube, man, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you get notified when a new TWiRT is dropping. So we do the show live, and we also, our fantastic producer, Suncast, edits the show. We top and tail the show properly. If there's any technical errors, we try to cut those out and make the show make good sense. And we republish the finished version the very next day, typically on the Friday after we do the show live. So either way you can join us would be just great. Hey, it's a hot summer Thursday, hot across a whole lot of the nation. It's hot here in Nashville, Tennessee, and that's why I'm inside in the cool confines of the Telos Alliance studio here in Nashville. We've got a show for you today that's going to be interesting and fun. I love talking to engineers who love what they do, and our guest today loves what he does. It's a real passion for him to be an engineer and to be in radio and to do all kinds of things in radio. So enough about me. Let's talk to our guest, Brett Gibson. Brett, hey, welcome in. Good to see you on TWiRT.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kurt. Really appreciate the opportunity to be able to be here and be amongst a number of fantastic guests. Of course, I've told you I'm kind of geeking out a little bit, been watching the show for years, and I was really fortunate to be able to have the opportunity to share a little bit of my wisdom and passion with what I do. Of course, I don't have a fancy studio here. You're in the basement lair, the ham shack of the KT0V amateur radio station, but actually it also belongs to my wife, who's licensed along with my 2 kids too. So that's where I'm at.
KT0V is your ham call. All right, we'll put that in the show notes so people can take note of that and look you up as appropriate. And hey, where do you tend to hang out in the ham bands?
Well, lately I've been kind of all over the place. I'm a big 6-meter lover, so those, of course, that have their ham license know that the Magic band is magic, especially this time of the year. Although it's kind of starting to die down a little bit now as the humid layers, begin to get down and not give you as much of the distance. But I like to hang out there. But if I'm not there, I'm usually running around someplace between 10 and 160 meters. But I like FT8. We're a big digital family here. My wife especially, she loves digital. And so she will hang out on 10-meter digital most of the time. But there again, the sunspot cycle, of course, that's starting to go down too. But I'm hoping to encourage her with that, maybe to get her her upgraded ticket, get onto her general license now after a number of years as a tech.
I always appreciate how our knowledge of broadcast engineering is really enhanced by our hobby, our passion in the amateur radio world. And I'm a licensed amateur. I don't do much with it. When I have, I tend to like Echolink and that kind of thing, talking on local repeaters to people around the world. And I think that's a lot of fun. But I haven't gotten into, the real shortwave. And I haven't gotten into the digital modes, and I'd like to learn more about those. But we should have we can have a little conversation about that. So Brett, your position, you're a chief engineer. You do a few things in the broadcasting world, and we're going to learn about something that you do that has to do with vertical real estate. That I'm very interested in the business case, and just what it means to be in the vertical real estate business as a landlord, and what it means to rent vertical real estate. Of course, I'm talking about tower space. I like to call it vertical real estate because I just think it's a different and intriguing way to talk about it. We're going to talk about that. And but you're the chief engineer for Voice of the Master Radio. Give us the elevator speech about your chief engineering job with that company.
Well, I was really fortunate. I actually got kind of called back into this after I had been out of it for a number of years because there's a big need for engineers, and particularly ones that would be willing to move to a town of about 500 people, even though we have many thousands of people underneath our signals. From little old Suring, Wisconsin here, all the way to our latest station that I just signed on in July was a station that I helped build originally in Duluth, Superior, Wisconsin, and we signed that on brought it into the network. So I was pretty excited about that. But we've got 30, up to 33 stations now that I take care of. You start to lose track. If you talk, Chris Tarr can tell you, you try to keep track of them, but they're like ants running around sometimes.
Chris tells me he takes care of, I don't know, 48 or 50 or something like that. You take care of 33. And Voice of the Master, as the name would imply, we're not talking about RCA records. We're talking about religious teaching radio stations, right?
Right. Yeah. And in fact, we are a gospel station. I really think it's a gem because so many of the stations have, and do a great job. They've gone over to the contemporary Christian music idea, where we have stayed with our traditional roots. We do a lot of Southern gospel and traditional songs along with teaching. So there's stations for younger demographic, and of course our demographic is a bit older. I'm starting to get into that. Of course, I love Southern gospel and that now at my age, and so it's just been a real treat, especially in areas like I just mentioned, Twin Ports, where there was no kind of format like this. To be able to put something like that on the air has been really sweet and really special to be able to proclaim God's word in so many places.
Something I find interesting is no matter what format that a station or a group of stations chooses to be, you still have public service obligations to inform the public, especially during times of emergency with EAS and maybe whatever comes along in future years to replace EAS. So every station, no matter what your listener's choice is to listen, hopefully the good news about radio is that they get informed about things that are impending, especially weather disasters that require immediate attention, like tornado warnings or severe thunderstorms or floods. You don't have too many tsunamis there in Wisconsin, but that's important in a lot of parts of the U.S. We're talking to Brett Gibson. Brett is the chief engineer for Voice of the Master Radio, 33 stations, and also Brett does engineering through his own company. And we're going to be, in just a few minutes, talking about vertical real estate, because this is a business that, frankly, 30 plus years ago, I tried to get into, and I really didn't know what I was doing. So I didn't really get very far. I did have some contracts drawn up because I had a couple tower sites that I didn't own, but I was in control of, and I could rent the site and then sublet it out to other people. So I'm very interested to hear about the business and technical aspects of that. Hey, our sponsor for this first early part of the show is AIR, AIIR, air.com. Ricky Lee is the CEO, and he's been on our show before. And something that we as engineers, when we find out about something that's really going to help our broadcast operations, even though not maybe us directly, it's great if we can relate those to program directors, to music directors, to the station ownership and management. And one of those things that, hey, we can really help out here is by talking to our station owners, managers, music directors. Maybe that's you, by the way, about music scheduling from AIR. Music scheduling has for a long time, forever, been kind of an expensive prospect. You got to buy software, install it on your machine, pay maintenance fees, maintain the software. If that computer dies, woo, you're out of luck. Well, if you're tired of wrestling with clunky music scheduling software, you can meet Air's Music Scheduler. It's powerful scheduling, simplified, and it's in your browser. And that means it's from any computer or device with a browser. So with drag and drop clocks, reusable templates, you can build a day's playlist or an entire month, literally in moments. Import your existing library. That's easy to do. Or start fresh. And then you can assign categories, commands, and audio types with lightning speed. The cloud-based platform frees you to schedule from literally anywhere, anytime. No installations, no headaches like that. And with fully customizable rules for artist separation, for tempo, for flow, for title thresholds, and more, you're always going to hit your station's unique brand. You can really adjust this beautifully. You can see issues highlighted in real time and get instant fix suggestions when the scheduling is in progress. And you can export these logs effortlessly into things like Playout One, Wide Orbit, Myriad, Play It Live, Station Playlist. And by the way, this list is growing. They're taking your requests. You got an automation system that you need this to export to. Let the folks at air.com know. Try Air Music Scheduler for free through September. Through we're halfway through August, so for another 5 weeks, you can try it for free. And after that, it's just $60 per month per station. If you're ready to simplify your scheduling, visit air.com, click the button for scheduler, and sign up for that today. Try it free. You're gonna like it. The concept of doing it online is just amazing, and the reliability of how that works is also fantastic. All right. Thanks, Air.com and Ricky Lee and everybody at Air for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. And just a reminder, I use their Playout One at like 21 radio stations. Love it. Thank you. All right. Our Brett Gibson. I keep wanting to call you Brett Gilbert. He's another friend of mine from Oklahoma, but you're Brett Gibson. So welcome in, Brett Gibson. Brett, I've promoted twice now this thing about vertical real estate, and we'll have other topics coming up, including some great ideas that you have about IP connectivity and how you're using that to feed stations and take care of remote controls. But let's talk about vertical real estate. How did you get into this idea of leasing tower space?
Well, in the case of the voice of the master here, I kind of got inherited, but I dealt with it at other stations that I had been at, of course, before, particularly those that own their own towers. In our case, we own two major facilities and a couple of smaller ones, and so then of course those topics come up. And one of my mentors and a great friend, Alan Kilgore, was our chief engineer for almost 25 years before he retired and handed the reins off to me. And he made sure to be careful to show me all the leases and kind of get me up to speed on that. But I'd already been, as a station manager previously, been involved in doing the audits, I call it, going through and making sure all the language looked good, and that we were thoroughly protected, but it also was advantageous for those that were renting from us. And that's kind of the case here, as I review things and make sure that that it works for both parties, because sometimes you can get the cost over a certain point to where the broadcaster is making far less profit, and it's not going to be good for either. And in our case, this is great residual income every month that comes in, because we've got renters on our Suring tower here. We have cell phone, we've got two-way radio, from our one of our public service utilities that rents from us. Of course, I've got some ham stuff on there that's part of our public service. But you got to keep an eye on all those leases and make sure that everyone is following the rules. One of my big rules is nobody on my towers unless, number one, you've talked to me first, and that I've got their information so that I can fully vet them out before I ever let them get on our steel, because we've had some incidences, not with Voice of the Master, but in previous places where I had some really major stuff happen and wasn't involved in that. And make sure that we cover our bases, if you will, before anything major happens, or we have a liability issue.
I've got so many questions. Let me kind of begin where what seems like the beginning to me. let's say you're in charge of a tower, or you own a tower, or maybe you're part of the company that owns a tower. So you're doing this either on behalf of yourself, you own the tower, or you're doing it on behalf of the company that owns the tower, the broadcast facility typically. Anyway, it's yours to lease out. What criteria make a tower good to rent out? What has to be in place to say this tower is valuable to other people and I can make some money at that? What do you look for?
Well, I think the first thing you got to do is you've got to make sure that the tower can handle the loading. We've got wind loading, ice loading in these parts, and I know Chris has brought this up on previous casts where we was talking about the major ice storm that we had here this past spring, and he had damage in his facilities, and we did too, with ice falling off. So that's the first thing. I start there. If somebody wants to rent space from me, the first thing I do is look at what do I have left for loading. We have a really amazing tower here in Suring. It's 900 feet, and we make sure that we've kept plenty of space or available space on that tower so that we can rent it out. But that's where I start. But if I'm on a tower, like a good example is the Duluth Tower. Before we do any kind of an upgrade, we get some professionals in, some guys with really good knowledge of the actual steel, how it was built, when it was built, and take a look at all of those factors, find out, does this have the capacity to handle what we're throwing on there, and will we be able to upgrade in the future if we let a renter come on, or would we have to kick them off, that sort of thing. But I usually always start with tower loading. Can it handle it? And when I'm building a tower, if I'm looking at that, I talk with the interested parties, which is usually the station or the ministry that I'm helping, and say, okay, would you like this to be a facility where you could get some rental income in the future with having renters there? And if the answer is yes, then we're okay. Now we move to the phase of, well, okay, how much more is it going to cost us to build a bigger tower, a beefier tower, one with better wind load, better ice load, than it is to just build one that will hold your FM stick or the facilities that are there, and then kind of work it out from that point. But that's normally the way that I start that.
What kind of a tower company can evaluate this for you? I know tower companies. I trust them fully to put up an antenna and hang the coax and ground it properly, but I don't think that they have the knowledge to evaluate tower loading. What do you look for?
Well, there's a number of companies that actually will specialize in that for you, or you can do your own math. My aforementioned Al Kilgore is really good at that kind of stuff. He can look at the paperwork. He's kind of like my legal beagle, if you will. And I love that he's still part-time on our staff here and hasn't left. And I've told him already I'd drag him back from wherever he tries to run off to if he goes, because he's one of those guys that's got so much experience up there in that head. I have a hard time remembering what I had for breakfast some days, and he just has a real knowledge of that, and he can take a look at those things. In our case, in my case here for me. But there's tower crews, there's different tower businesses that I've used that are good at not only checking out to see what kind of shape the tower is in, but they can take a look at the specs of that tower, find out how it was built, what it was built with, the brands, the heights, all of that, and come up with what will it handle. Okay, it's already at maximum wind load now, but what could we do to improve that tower? What can we add to it? New bracing and that sort of thing. And so I try to pull in those experts, because, like I said, I'm good with the leases and doing that side of it, and I can take a look at the basic specs of a tower, but I always run that one up the old flagpole before I say, all right, yes, we're going to allow you to rent space from us.
One more tech question about the tower loading. And years ago, I had a fellow work for me when I was doing Harnack Engineering full time, and he would use publicly available published data on Roan towers to evaluate Roan brand towers, not other ones. And he did a lot of math himself to help figure out, okay, we can put an antenna here, but not here. And so I guess my question to you is, what are a couple things that have surprised you that really matter? For example, okay, we think of the antenna that somebody's proposing to put on our tower as the big thing that maybe weighs a lot or prevents wind loading, but you also have the coax that's going to it. That's weight and wind loading. And then you also have, where's it going? Is it going between guy wire levels, or is it going at or near a guy wire level? And are there differences at different guy wire levels in the strength of the tower and all that kind of stuff? Maybe you can tell us a couple of things that you've gone, that's not really what I expected, but I see the math bears that out now. What surprised you in evaluations?
Well, I think we've, had it in, in my experience, you were talking about like in between guide wire points, and there was one case back in Minnesota when we were doing some work on one of our earlier towers that we were we were told several times by, we'll say, uninformed individuals, but that tower is not going to handle it. It's not going to be able to hold that weight. And then we brought in some of those experts and we took a look at that, and they said, hey, if you do go between here and here with this, with this essential wind loading, you'd be able to, go to this height, but you can't go to this height without, doing something to strengthen the guide wires or, beef up the guide points in some way. And so those were some of, I guess, what I would consider to be surprises. I've not had any real bad gotchas in my career, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
In that sense. I mean, most of the projects have gone real smooth once we've gotten everything up there. But it's doing the pre-planning. It's really getting in and spending the time to do the paperwork. That stuff that not all of us really like that much. But it's taking the time to really look over the numbers and make sure that that everything looks good. And then, like I said, calling in those experts, and they can usually take any type of tower. It doesn't matter if it's a TWiRT or an Allied or a Rowan, and they can look at the publicly available specs that you were talking about and be able to come up with a conclusion, and then we can make a plan for, okay, well, the way it's built is not going to handle what we'd like to do, but we can add this and this and this at this cost, and that will beef it up quite a bit. Or no, there's really no effective way to make this tower any stronger without taking it down and starting all over again. So there's some those kind of scenarios too that you look at.
What are some of the more typical additions or things you would do to beef up a tower to make it hold a proposed antenna? For example, let's say I wanted to put let's say I got a big license and I want to put an 8-bay ERI rototiller style antenna on one of your towers, and your evaluation comes back and says, well, it's not adequate right now. Here's what it needs. What are typically some of the here's what it needs?
Well, in my experience has been the typicals would be stuff like, there again, fixing the guide points or beefing up the guide points, adding some more, adding different guide wires that have a different, we'll say tensile strength to be able to support the weight. Because essentially, we talk about this even on my own ham tower out here in my backyard. The guy wires, I keep trying to call them guide. The technical term is guy wires.
Yeah.
And so the guy wire job is really hold that tower vertical, keep it vertical so that it doesn't twist, because if it starts to twist, get a little off center and off it goes. And so we look at that. We'll look at what we can do to beef it up on the tower leg itself. There's different bracketing that they can use. There's standoffs, a number of different items that they can put on the tower that will make the tower handle that that big 8-bay antenna that you just described, versus versus what it has now, or strengthening things at the top. They can put extra bracing in the actual tower itself. I've seen guys do that to beef the towers up, and so that also can really help a lot. But there are other experts that are that are even more knowledgeable than me that can give you the specific details of here's how we do it, and how they put it together. Those are the guys I call in and say, hey, this is what I'd like to do. I want to put another 8-bay under my 10-bay, and what do we have to do on this tower to beef it up if it's possible? And they usually tell us, and then they give the tower crews the instruction on how to build it.
Gotcha. Good deal. Yeah, and I've also seen crews replace the diagonal members on a portion of the tower to beef up. We sure use that phrase a lot, to beef up the tower. Hey, it's This Week in Radio Tech. We're talking to Brett Gibson. At this moment, we're talking about vertical real estate, renting towers out. And I've got more questions about the business side of that here in just a minute. Brett's advice so far is you got to employ a professional who can evaluate the tower's strength and see if it will hold what may be proposed, or to see how much more it will hold, so you know what you can go out and advertise. Advertising is something else that I'm a little bit interested in, to find out how you get the word out that, hey, I've got tower space available if you want it. How would I get cell companies to know that you don't have to build a new tower down the road and buy the property and all that? You can rent off, from me. All right. It's This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack. We are talking to Brett Gibson today. He's the chief engineer for Voice of the Master. And our show is brought to you in part by our friends at Broadcast Bionics. I was just chatting with Dan McQuillan this past week, and sometime after the IBC show, Dan is going to be our guest again. And he has got some amazing technologies to talk about. He may show some of them off at IBC. I'm not sure, but he's certainly going to talk about them on this show. Now, looking back a little bit, one technology that's been around for a while and is still quite valid and useful, and that is their Camera One system at Broadcast Bionics. It makes putting the work you're already doing, the on-air shows, the talk shows, the entertainment shows you're already doing in the studio or even at home, really easy to put on the internet, either live or best ofs to put on the internet as social media pieces. So let's see about Camera One from Broadcast Bionics.
Camera One from Broadcast Bionics. Designed to bring video to your audio content. Visualizing radio and podcasts for social media. Camera One can automatically create, capture and brand professionally switched video for live streaming or upload, making your production shareable. Control and configure using a web browser on any device. Camera One is available as a 4-camera or 8-camera system using the Blackmagic A10 Mini range, including the A10 Mini Extreme. You can use cameras to suit your studio and your budget. You'll need one camera for a studio wide shot and usually one camera per microphone. A standard multi-channel sound card or IP driver monitors audio from each studio microphone, and we work natively with Axia systems. Ideally, this will be a post-fader feed from each mic, although you can use pre-fade audio or a mic split if that's all you have available. These audio levels are used to intelligently switch the video feed when each contributor is talking. You can also group microphones together into one shot and use the audio from a mixer's aux bus. You can use Camera One's auto switch feature, or disable it and switch using the on-screen buttons or the buttons on the A10. Recordings can automatically start when you tell the system you're on the air. This on-air indication can be linked to your studio's red lights via IP or an Avantec Adam GPIO interface. You can quickly browse all the videos that have been automatically created during your broadcast, download them and post. Camera One is a user-installable system. You'll need a good spec Windows 10 PC, i7 with plenty of storage and 16 gig of RAM. It's better if this machine isn't used for anything else. Remember, you can control the software in a web browser on another device on your network. Camera One, a thrifty way of creating scroll-stopping video from your show or podcast from Broadcast Bionics.
Really brilliant ideas from Broadcast Bionics. They do so much more, including virtual rack. That's something else you want to check out too to get your broadcast infrastructure virtualized. Thanks, Broadcast Bionics, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. It's Kirk Harnack along with Brett Gibson. Brett is up in Wisconsin. You're not terribly far away from Chris Tarr, are you?
Yeah, we're about 2.5 hours or so, maybe 3 on the long side from Mr. Tarr.
Uh-huh. All right. Well, you can visit when you want to. How about that? Hey, okay. So, vertical real estate. What do you do to let people? It's a pretty small audience that you're advertising to. How do you get the word out that, yep, I have vertical real estate for sale, for rent? Keep us in mind.
Well, I'll tell you, probably one of the easiest ways to do it doesn't require a whole lot of effort. It is literally the fact that the tower is sitting there. I have found more word of mouth, like The places that have come to, for example, our Suring Tower have come along and are, hey, we see you got a tower up there. Do you have any space available for X, Y, and Z? Or just recently here, about a year and a half ago, we added another Christian FM station to our tower over in Irmo, Wisconsin. And it was a similar situation. They were looking for tower sites. And especially on the FM broadcast side, we kind of like to be on towers that have other radio stations, broadcast stations on, rather than cell phone. It's not that you can't. We've got some of our own facilities on a cell tower, but they like to be with other FMs, and so they knew we were up there, and they were wondering if we had space, and they were able to get, of course, their construction permit and ultimately their license to be there. But I think word of mouth for us here has been the biggest thing. We've had some brokers that have called us. I had somebody just today that called that was trying to broker either tower space for us, or they like to broker our monthly rental and kind of convert it into a one-time lump sum, which feels like an infomercial to me when they call me. I'm like, no, we'll take our monthly income off the tower, thanks very much. But that's that's one of the ways we kind of get it out. And then there are some companies that will actually help you with the process of bringing prospects in, and they get a little bit of a cut of the original fee that you sign them up. There are some companies that continue to take a fee monthly or that, but unless they're going to manage the thing for me, I wouldn't get into a contract like that. I would be fine to pay a finder's fee. Hey, thanks for bringing them to me, but now we're good from this point. But I think that's probably the way that I've found in my career that most people have found our towers, is they just see them sitting there and they're like, hey, can I throw XYZ on that?
I'm sure that what vertical real estate is worth varies a lot depending on where you are, what you're hitting, and that kind of thing. Do you have any rules of thumb for pricing of vertical real estate based upon any number of factors? I mean, 800 feet up in northern New Jersey is probably a lot more expensive than 800 feet up in Suring, Wisconsin. What do you go by?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be market dependent for sure. It's also going to depend on what kind of space that you get. Again, that we go back to that that comment about what do you have available on your tower site that you can use. If you've got limited space left, it's going to cost more than if you have quite a bit more space. I would say that the tower in Suring is going to cost less than most definitely than getting down to Green Bay, or maybe even some of the towers that Chris Tarr's stations are on, for example, or maybe even your own, where your stations are, Kirk. So it depends a lot on that, and that's kind of what we look at. We look at the person that's renting from us. I don't try to be too terribly greedy. As an example, cell phone. Because cell phone had a lot of money as a general rule and were willing to pay a lot of money to tower owners, they have really changed the market for the rest of us, whether it's a two-way installation or especially a broadcast installation. A lot of times when I've called a company, especially if it's a major brand, type tower owner, they want an arm and a leg for us to just put a two-bay antenna up for a translator, or even for a three-bay antenna for a small primary station. I try not to do that. I look at each case, and again look at how much loading I've got on my tower, what do I got for room available, and I try to make it so that what I really want to try to cultivate is a long-term renter. I want somebody that's going to stay with us and stay on the long term. And so if you hit them really high up front, they might be able to find a better deal down the road because
Yeah.
Joe Blow builds a new tower, right? And so now all of a sudden they can run over there and they save a lot of money, versus if they've had a really good relationship with you already and you've kept the costs down, they tend to stick with you.
All right, you're an engineer. You understand RF, and especially since you're also a ham radio guy, you understand how different kinds of RF interact and antennas and proximities, and what problems you can have with several transmitters, in close proximity to each other, and the antennas that they're attached to, I should say. So when you're thinking about co-locating different services on a tower, or even maybe two FMs or three FMs on the same tower. Okay, so what combination of services um, are maybe more difficult than others, or are they all difficult if you don't do it right? What raises red flags for you when you're thinking, oh, somebody wants to put this on my tower, I got to watch out for this kind of interference or this kind of intermod being created, that sort of thing?
Well, I would say that there's a chance for them all to be kind of difficult. Depends on, there again, the installation. However, I would find that it would be more challenging when you're talking about, like, for example, two FM broadcasters. I'll go back to my Irma tower. We've got the two stations there, but I put language into the lease that talks about making sure that they've got the proper filtering. And of course, we'll go out and do proofs of performance on both stations, make sure that we're not doing any, harmonics that shouldn't be out, and doing harmful interference. But I look at all of those factors, and I will do kind of a environment, or at least if I don't do it personally, I'll have someone do it for me, where we look at, okay, my station plus this station equals this station, or this station minus this station, the old, A plus B equals C, A minus B equals C type of thing, and figure out if there's going to be something where we can get a harmonic that'll come out and it'll be undesirable somewhere. And what do we do to filter that? Okay, well, it might mean that we've got to put in some good filtration, some good cans, as we call them in the ham radio world, for the two-way stuff. Of course, there are a lot bigger cans in the broadcast world, but
Uh-huh.
that's essentially what we do to keep each other out of each other and make everybody happy again.
One of the frustrating things that I've had happen at sites where there are multiple FMs, I've had less trouble with intermod creation in the different transmitters than I've had more trouble with a lot of RF overwhelming some less than professional grade IT equipment. So, for example, an IP radio that may be on the lower end of the economic spectrum. I've had certainly trouble with a bunch of RF getting into the cabling, even if it's shielded cabling, Cat 5 cabling, Cat 6 cabling, going to the IP radio, causing it to have problems, not work well, work intermittently. We turn off a couple of the transmitters, the FM transmitters, and voila, the IP radio works again. What do you run into combinations like that? And if so, what kind of good engineering practice do you follow to mitigate or just put a stop to that kind of problem?
Well, I've not only had some instances where we've had problems with IP radios, specifically in the scenario that you just described, but we've also had like tower lights. This just happened to me, again, going back to my favorite site, Irma, the renter that came onto our tower. We had our cable going up from our control box, of course, at the base of the tower and the transmitter building up to the top tower light. And as it went through the field of their RF ended up burning up our cable. It started arcing inside, and pretty soon
Hmm.
we go there, and I'm looking up, and I'm seeing this cable just kind of whipping in the wind up there with a warning. I got a warning that my top tower light was out, and so off I run to file a NOTAM and get the legal stuff squared away, and then we have to deal with that problem. So how we dealt with it was we put a conduit up, metal conduit all the way along and around where the RF is, including we decided to cover our antennas as well, even though
Hmm.
when we were just by ourselves, it wasn't an issue. But we thought, you know what? Good preventative maintenance. Let's get some extra insurance in here. So that would be one of my first recommendations. If you've got a radio, that if the radio itself is not being RF to death, there's not a whole lot that I can think of that you're going to be able to do if it's just simply these two stations are just overloading this radio's front end somehow and it doesn't work. But if it's really truly interference that's getting into the Cat 5, Cat 6 line that is running the radio, trying to put it into conduit, and maybe even taking that shielded cable that you were talking about and grounding it at different points, it starts to bleed that RF off. That helps, quite a bit with that. But then I would just say, okay, because hey, all of us have done those, those less expensive point-to-point radio links. We've got our favorite brands that we've used, but I ended up just getting higher quality equipment, and that of course has better shielding for its antennas and things inside the radio that's on the antenna itself, and that usually eliminated the problem for me.
Gotcha. And hey, I hadn't really thought about maybe putting Cat 5 in conduit. Can you think of, what good engineering practice? Let's imagine that you say, okay, I've got 3 different Cat 5s going up the tower. They're 200 feet long, and I got some radios that'll go at that level. What good engineering practice might you want to practice with the conduit? That's going to shield the cables until they get right up in the proximity of the IP radios. Anything particular to think about or worry about in putting the conduit up?
Well, I guess what I make sure I do is, of course, it's all strapped to the tower well, and it's grounded, by essence of it being strapped to the tower. Make sure that it's strapped in there. And then, like I said, if it's possible to be able to take a shielded cable and ground it in other places, where you've got it. It's a little difficult if you're trying to run, Cat 5 through a 10-foot piece of conduit to ground it, every 2 feet inside of there without, breaking that open. But if you can do some grounding, maybe every 10 feet, and you can kind of close it back up again, where where you can access the ground, but you can close the conduit back up. That helps. In my experience, I found that to be the case, where I've been able to do more of of that sort of a thing, right up to the antennas. But it's also just upgrading the quality of my radios. There again, like I said, if I'm getting too much interference because of a lesser expensive point-to-point link for internet or whatever I'm trying to use, then I just go to something that's a little bit higher quality. And if I'm trying to do, like, say, 3 radios at a time, I might consider, okay, well, what are the consequences of my running all 3 of the Cat 5 lines through the same piece of conduit? Will they interact with each other? What brand of cable do I use? Maybe I upgrade my cable to make it less susceptible, inside the conduit if they're run together. Or I simply say, all right, well, hey, I got 3 radios I need. I got 3 tower legs. I'll run 3 sets of conduit up. Again, it might be expensive on the front end, but it's a great extra insurance later on for higher performance and less degradation of the signal, and of course packet errors when it comes to the IP side. Down the road, that's some things I guess I would consider.
We're talking to Brett Gibson about, he is the chief engineer for his master's voice of the master, I should say, radio network. And he does tower space leasing, but he's also a customer on some towers. And when we finish with this next commercial break, I want to ask Brett about when you're a customer, because I got a couple of radio stations where we're renting space. One of them is a cell tower, and the cell tower has, frankly, a lot of stuff on it, and it's a really good site. But I want to know what we should be aware of in the lease. So that's coming up. Hey, Brett, one of my favorite things in the world to install at studios and transmitter sites is the topic of this commercial, and that is the Henry Engineering Back UPS. Back UPS. Now, it sounds like a simple prospect. Back UPS is a box. Oh, there it is on screen. It's a box that has 2 power inputs, and then it has a duplex. It has 1 power output. Yes, it's a duplex output. There's 2 plugs there, but it's really 1 power output. And the simple yet effective circuit inside the back UPS, normally it lets your AC power that's coming from your uninterruptible power supply, your UPS. Normally it passes that power from the input that's marked input from UPS. It runs that power over to the duplex output. And so you're using your UPS power. And of course, most of the time the UPS is just passing commercial AC, or maybe it's a dual conversion type, where it's always an online UPS. But either way, your UPS is feeding everything just as it normally would. But you know what? maybe you found out, but I sure have found out the hard way that UPSs are not the most reliable things on the planet. I've had several of them go bad at very inopportune times. One of those opportune times, I think I've told the story, I'm not going to tell it all again, but resulted in a police escort from the airport back to the radio station, so we could get the station back on the air before our plane left. And really, the UPS picked a terrible time to quit. We were leaving American Samoa, and thank goodness it's a 3-hour boarding process. So anyway, we had time to go to the station and back, but we did get a police escort. Well, what this does is if your UPS dies, you've got another input, and that's the input that's coming directly from the power company, from the line, from the outlet on the wall, or wherever you're getting the commercial power. In other words, it's bypassing the UPS, and the back UPS can switch between those really quickly. And then, hey, when your UPS does come back online, let's say you've been changing the batteries. Do you want your equipment in the rack to go off while you're changing UPS batteries? No, of course not. And you don't want to reboot a bunch of computers or be off the air while you're moving a power plug. And that's what back UPS does for you. It takes care of that real quick instantaneous switching. And when the UPS comes back online, the back UPS, you can program it for how much time you want it to make sure that the UPS is putting out good power before it switches back to the UPS. So it's not sitting there chattering, between two things. I love this box. I've got several racks full of equipment that only has one power supply in the equipment. See, if you've got equipment that's got two power supplies, hey, no problem. You plug one into the UPS power strip and the other one into the non-UPS power strip, and you're golden. But what about all your equipment that only has one power supply, like your EAS box or an Ethernet switch that's keeping your audio over IP on the air? It may only have one power supply, and other things as well. I've got some audio processors that have just one power supply. I've got some that have two, but some that have one. So the back UPS from Henry Engineering, wow, it's the thing to have. Check it out. You need to get yours from Broadcasters General Store, bgs.cc. And hey, I think I've bought about 6 of these back UPSs over the past 2.5 years or so, and put them at transmitter sites and at studios, depending on where they're needed, and they are just great. Broadcasters General Store, bgs.cc is the website. Friendly people, sharp pencils, good discounts. You can call them at 352-622-7700 for Broadcasters General Store. Thanks so much, BGS and Henry, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, Brett Gibson is my guest, and Brett, I guess I want to put a bow on this and wrap it up. Concerns if you are a renter on a tower. What should you be looking out for yourself, for your own renter concerns?
Well, I think some of the things that, I tend to look at for us is, trying to negotiate because costs for everybody, it doesn't matter if you're a nonprofit like we are or you're a for-profit station, the costs are always a concern. And so I try to, look at getting reasonable, cost adjustments to our leases. The reality is, and I look at this even when I'm talking about, leasing to someone else, the cost of that vertical real estate doesn't change that much. Again, cell phones have kind of ruined this for some folks where they put some really expensive, percent clauses in, like 15% a year, 20% a year, your rates go up. And you're like, what, what? I can't afford to do that. Pretty soon it's, you're out of sight. And so that's one of the first things that I always check on. Some of the other concerns I have is who else is on the tower with us. So now we'll go back to one of our sites, for example, that's in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And that's actually, we have a full station on a cell phone tower. And so I'm always concerned when we do that we are transmitting very, clean RF, that we don't have issues with any harmonics or things that are getting into the cell phone companies. And, and so I do check all of that. And I look at that, like if I'm going to look at a site for the first time, I'm going to really look at, okay, who's on here? What frequencies are they on? Are there any chances that, second, third, fourth, fifth harmonic could be, a problem for us, in the future, or if we, who's nearby? Is there another station that could mix with us and come out? And so it sounds like it's our problem, but it's really their problem. And we've had plenty of those tail chasing moments in engineering and whatnot. So we try to, or I try to look at those kinds of scenarios when I'm looking at a tower site, and then of course I look at what are the requirements. Can I change anything? That's a big
Mhm.
one. Like a lot of these guys, the different big tower companies, they don't let you change anything. Even in an emergency, or put up an emergency antenna. So I try to get clauses in my leases that say, hey, if my antenna burns up, Lord forbid, can I hang a temporary antenna nearby, 50 feet away or right next to it or whatever, but gives me the ability to do that without an additional big pinch in my rent or
Mhm.
extra permissions. I stay within the parameters of, okay, I use a approved tower company that they've already approved, but we can get up there and we can get on the air quick, because that can really be a problem where you have a scenario like that where something happens, you burn line up or you burn up your antenna, and you can't do anything without going through 14 chains of different layers at these companies in order to get permission to be able to even put a tower climber on the steel.
Mm. Okay. Okay. Um, how can you tell if a if a lease contract is fair to, well, if it's fair to you, no matter which position you're in, landlord position or renter position? What are you looking for that tells you that it's fair? If you said there may be an escalator of 15% a year, holy moly, that could be pretty terrible after just a few years. What I don't know. What are some things that are red flags for you?
Well, it would definitely be that. And of course, I'm
Yeah.
using that as a way outlier kind of idea,
Yeah.
but I'm looking at that. And again, I'm looking at the restrictions. I'm looking at, can I climb the tower? What are the restrictions that they might have worked in there for those kinds of things? And, if I find that the restrictions are too much, or there's, too much of a clause, or it goes up, too much per year, then I might say, all right, I'm going to look for another tower site close by, another one down the road. That's one of the things that's starting to happen in the vertical real estate world that I'm seeing. And again, I'm not in this, real super deep. There's guys that are much more expert at this than me. But I'm noticing that the trend, at least in my world, that has been where there's enough towers now that there's plenty of competition. So if you've got one that's not super reasonable, and I'll go back to Sheboygan story that was told there. There are like three towers all within a block of each other right there on the same property. And one of the big cell phone companies, one of the major three anyway, built their own tower right next to the one that they were on. They were on the tower we're on because they weren't getting favorable lease rates. And so they just
Hmm.
talked to the landowner and said, hey, can we lease some more space over here? Can we put up a self-support tower? They did it, and they moved over there. Well, guess what? Nobody's jumped onto this other tower to replace that revenue for them. And I would think that those companies pay attention to that stuff, and so they haven't been necessarily coming down too hard on us to say, okay, we're going to get you to pay more money for what you're doing, to make up for it and whatnot. Although they can't go outside the terms of our lease, but those are the kinds of things that I've seen changing in the marketplace now, where vertical real estate is not quite as hot of a commodity as it used to be, which is good for those of us that are trying to get maybe a new site moved on. And again, I would say that my experience is not necessarily typical of everywhere in the U.S., but at
Hmm.
least around in Wisconsin and into northeast Minnesota there. You look at the Duluth Hill, my hometown. Well, I grew up in Superior, Wisconsin, but I married a Cloquet, Minnesota girl about 15 miles west of there. But so I talk about Duluth fondly. Duluth has like 20 towers on RF Hill. If you ever come into Duluth Superior and you
Wow.
look, they're just one right after another, stacked all the way up on top of the hill. And there's all kinds of things to choose from over there. So there is plenty of real estate. And maybe not all those towers could support your particular installation, but I'm sure there are ones that can.
We've been talking about vertical real estate, and we just don't have time to talk about everything that I wanted to. But one of the things one of the practical use cases, obviously, your vertical real estate is great for hanging your antennas. Maybe your traditional 950 megahertz STL antenna. Maybe if you're still using a Marty style antenna, whether what band it's in. A lot of those were in the 450 megahertz band. But let's chat about IP connectivity and what you've been doing with regard to that. That's a frequent topic on this show. Understand, Brett, you've been using some micro MPX technology, which I happen to like a lot. I think it's really easy to implement and at reasonable bit rates, and it tends to work well, and it tends to be give you out of the box the possibility of dual path. So if one of your IP paths fails, you can have a backup path that works. But tell me what you've been doing lately. What are you having success with in the world of IP connectivity?
Well, with our friends at Telos, of course, I've been using a lot of their micro MPX equipment. I have two of my stations right now, and the plan is actually to begin feeding even more this way, are being fed micro MPX. The new Duluth station that we just signed on, and that just works flawlessly. Of course, the underlying is we've got to have a good primary and backup internet service, and I try to find a mix of ISPs and a mix of different ways to get it there. So I might use a WISP type as a backup or a primary, and then I use another, say DSL type as my primary or secondary, just so that I have two different paths to keep that audio flowing. But I'm pretty excited about just how you can get this incredible sound. I think I take my $15,000 Ferrari, Omnia 11 processor, and find that perfect setting for it, and I can ship that out to every single one of my stations and compress that thing down and have it come out and go, I really can't tell a difference between listening to it straight on my 100,000 watt Suring station or my station in Duluth. It's pretty incredible. And so that's some of the stuff I'm pretty excited about. I can't wait to upgrade internet at our other locations. It's the biggest, the key thing for me is I want good infrastructure. And so I've been working on that at our sites. And of course, we've talked about a little bit working on a whole bunch of stuff on the head end to get everything ready here to be able to perform as well.
Yeah, yeah. When you're looking at, well, I guess sometimes you may do your own IP radio link. If that's available, is that typically going to be your primary connection to a site?
Yeah, I mean, if I have good internet, then yes, because again, I don't need a processor. I don't have to worry about stereo generation. I happen to be a big fan of Nautel, so my transmitters are almost all Nautel, at least my primaries are, and so they already have, for example, my RDS is built right in, so I can just turn RDS on, turn on my injection level, and feed right from Suring here through IP right to those transmitters. And at the same time, I'm feeding my micro MPX, and I'm sure some are saying, well, why don't you just put your RDS into your processor and feed it through the micro MPX? And that's a great question. It was kind of set up this way when I got here. I don't have a problem with that idea, other than I do like having the ability to push to different transmitters, and I can make things unique so that I can do a unique thing that's a little different in Duluth versus what I'm doing here in Suring on the Suring Green Bay station. So that's part of the reason that I'm doing it the way I'm doing it at the moment. But I'm really excited about that. But that's a new project, and of course we had to get this head end upgraded, and so I put in one of my favorite brands of IP infrastructure, just because it's a disruptive price point, great for ministries like ours that don't have tons and tons of money and in time to support, because there's not a paywall that I have to go through every year for upgrades, and that's Ubiquity. And I upgraded to the Ubiquity Enterprise firewalls, and they have been just working flawlessly, just wonderful. I've got the backup system So if one of my firewalls goes down or it has to be taken offline because I got to do a firmware update, the other one just takes over and then comes right back on, and then the other one can get updated. And so it really works out slick, and it's vastly improved our flow of IP data in and out of our facility here. We've got a fiber connection as our primary, and that
Mhm.
really, now that I'm full fiber from my firewall all the way out to the internet where I wasn't before because I didn't have the technology to do it. And I'm still in the process of finishing all that up, but got to get all these summer RF things in the field finished up first.
Isn't fiber great? I mean, ever since any site that we have at our stations and transmitter sites that is fed by fiber, I'm not saying we never have trouble, but I'm saying that I can count on them being reliable. And I would say that we're into 6 nines of reliability at sites with fiber, whereas if they're fed by cable, we're often at the 4 or 5 nines of reliability. So that's the fiber technology is great. And you mentioned about RDS, and hey, do you do RDS at the head end and distribute the same RDS to all the sites? May not be what you want to do, especially because of the PI code, or do you put a separate RDS generator at each site, which is program, even if it's static, at least you've got the right code in it for that transmitter site. So it's an interesting conundrum how you're going to get that handled. With micro MPX, you can do it either way. You can you can distribute RDS, or you could come out of the micro MPX decoder and go through an RDS encoder at each site that adds the information for each site. So it's an interesting conundrum, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is, and that's why I've kind of kept it the way that we've got it because I like
Mhm.
having the ability to have unique PI codes if I want to. Although you can make like I use VOTM, for example, voice of the master, as a PI
Mm.
code for some of my sites anyway. That stays static, so I could use one box if I wanted to, but right now I've been pushing it out to multiple places. And I kind of like to monkey around with different technology and see which one I like. And we've used the same RDS software for so long, and so I'm kind of excited. I've got a couple of names of some stuff that I'm playing with right now. But that's the reason I'm doing it that way, is because then my PI codes right at on the Nautel transmitter can just stay that way, and I just simply feed them. And because of the Ubiquity system, because of the Site Magic feature that they have, all of my sites are all together. So no matter where I go, I can go to Duluth and it's like I'm sitting in Suring, or vice versa. And so I'm pushing these out to what I would consider to be internal IPs. I don't have to have static addresses anymore at these sites,
Oh.
so I'm saving money
Mhm.
not having static IPs. It's not that it's such a big deal to have them, but it does save quite a bit of money if you don't have to have all of the sites be that way. I love having the ability to just be internal to each site. Some manufacturers make that a little more complicated with the way they do their VPNs, where the Ubiquity stuff. The Site Magic has really been a game changer for us.
I'm going to check into that. I'm going to put that in the show notes, and we'll check into that as well. I'm interested in that technology. Hey, we're talking to Brett Gibson. He is the chief engineer for Voice of the Master Radio in Wisconsin. And hey, we're going to take our last quick commercial break. When we come back, Brett's going to have a tip of the week, and you know what? I'm going to have one too. I don't usually have one, but I've got a tip of the week that I just can't wait to tell you. Our show is brought to you in part by Angry Audio and the Rave audio console from Angry Audio. They like to say about the Rave console, they didn't just cut any corners. They rounded a few, however. Rave is the new radio mixing console from Angry Audio with up to 8 stereo line inputs, 4 mic inputs, 2 output mix buses, and 2 mix minus outputs with talkback. They have flexible monitoring for the board operator, monitor feed to studio guests with talkback, automatic monitor muting, of course, when the mics are open, something you don't get with cheapy consoles. You get crystal clear metering and tallies, and the control surface is machined and anodized aluminum. I mean, it is Absolutely gorgeous. The markings, well, they're all laser etched, so they never wear out. I said never wear out. Easy installation with Studio Hub RJ45 connectors for line inputs and line outputs, and XLR inputs for your microphones. Now, there's a power supply, mic and line remote logic, warning and user tally outputs for lighting on-air signs and enunciators. And there's preview, or Q, as we used to call it, on every channel. Silky smooth faders, avionics switches, LED illumination. I mean, the list is on and on and on. You can tell by looking at it, it's a very sleek, low-profile desktop design. And it's just awesome. I love this console. It's beautiful. So many people are putting this into podcast studios, into production rooms, wherever you need a smaller console that sounds great and works well. Now, it's not a digital console, and it's not an AOIP console. It is a fundamental analog console that is extremely well designed. Check this thing out from Angry Audio. The website is angryaudio.com, and you're gonna love this console. So if you follow them on Facebook, you'll see a lot of people do love this console. Thanks, Angry Audio. Our show is also brought to you by Max Connect. And something that we point out every few weeks about Max Connect is their technical services. So they don't just make and sell some useful equipment or offer useful LTE services, for wireless connectivity. They have a team of experienced broadcast engineers and technicians who provide turnkey integrations, studio sites, transmitter site upgrades, also contract engineering services. With literally over 100 years of combined broadcast engineering experience, their team can handle nearly any challenge. And they've done dozens of studio builds all over the country. So if you're looking to convert your analog plant over to AOIP, well, they've got you covered. If you need to upgrade your automation system, they understand this. They can handle everything from equipment selection and purchase all the way through final on-air light getting lit up. They want to keep your project on time and on budget. Also, by the way, something that often gets overlooked, transmitter and site upgrades. That's a real specialty of Max Connect. If you're looking to upgrade your old tube transmitter to something solid state, well, their sales team can make sure you get the best valuable and reliability available and making sure you're not overspending. And they also install your transmitter if you like. Make sure that it's worry-free for years to come with proper ventilation, air conditioning, all that kind of stuff that goes into a reliable site. So check it out from the Max Connect group. Also, if you need our new remote control, they can do that too to make it a real easy operation where you can, walk away from it and yet have it monitored 24/7. Check it out at maxconnect.com. Yeah, I know it's spelled funny. We'll have a link in the show notes for maxconnect.com. All right. Hey, it's Kirk Harnack here. Just for the last couple of minutes, we have got a tip of the week from our friend, Brett Gibson. Brett, what did you want to tell us about?
Oh, well, there were so many tips. I was like, all right, which one do I pick out? But one of my favorite ones that I just kind of stumbled across, it was actually something that was brought to my attention through some of my ham buddies. So I know we've got some viewers that are out there who have remote sites, and you just need to be able to get some kind of an internet connection, a wireless internet connection, not a high-speed one like our friends at Max Connect do, but just something to be able to monitor your transmitter readings. I use these all in some of my sites. I'm converting pretty much all of them over so that I have this as my backup and for my SNMP feeds. But I found out about this company called Embedded Works, and they sell a Internet of Things, an IoT card, very inexpensively. You can get them with or without a static IP. The caveat is that the maximum speed of your download is only 750 meg. Yeah, there they are. Embedded Works, and so you can get these SIM cards. And then what I've been doing is I've been pairing them up with another Ubiquity product. Ubiquity makes a cellular radio, and so I simply put the SIM card into my Ubiquity cellular radio, and off I'm going. And I tend to buy the card that has no data cap. You can get some that have data caps. So if you've got a situation where you don't use a whole lot of data, about what you use every month, you may be able to get them even less expensive. But my ham buddies that started using them, you mentioned Echolink kind of at the top of the show, Kurt. There's also All-Star, and I do both. I've got an All-Star linked repeater with Echolink here in Suring and the guys started using these in the field because you need an internet connection for All-Star. But a lot of these remote sites don't have internet connection, and these things work terrific for that. So that's my tip of the week: is check out Embedded Works, and then Ubiquiti makes very inexpensive cellular radios. I really like them. I was using another brand before, but I don't like them nearly as much as I do the Ubiquiti stuff, and it's all in that same ecosystem too.
We will have a link in the show notes to Embedded Works and to the Ubiquiti cell radio as well. And an unusual event here. It's a red letter day here at the TWiRT studio. I have a tip of the week myself. Somebody mentioned this on Facebook, so it's not my original idea. I stole it like I do all my great ideas. So oftentimes we as engineers, we need to go set up a piece of equipment that may come with a known IP address, a default IP address, and that default IP address is not at all what we want, nor is it compatible with the network that we're getting ready to attach the equipment to. And so we got to get out a little Ethernet switch, and we got to put our laptop on the right IP address network and all that kind of thing. And that's fine. We can do that. Here's a convenient way to get it done. This is a little 4-port switch, and really it's 5 ports because one of the ports terminates in this USB Type-C adapter. And so you plug this into your laptop, and it looks like an Ethernet adapter, right? So it's already on this network that these guys are on. And then you just plug your new piece of equipment into this. And if it's appropriate, you can plug this, into your station's network, or even better, have your laptop on Wi-Fi. And that way it's got a NIC on the station's Wi-Fi, and it's got this other NIC, so to speak, for this little network. And you can more easily connect to and control and change the IP address to what you want on your piece of equipment. So this is a cool little box. Here's the box it comes from. Cable Matters was the brand name of this one, USB-C to 4-port gigabit Ethernet adapter. And I have found this to be pretty darn useful. I just used it a couple times last week. So that's pretty cool. We'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. Brett, we got to go, man. I appreciate you being on the show. Thanks for taking your time and putting your thoughts together and joining us on This Week in Radio Tech. I appreciate you.
Well, it's been a real treat, Kurt. Appreciate the opportunity, and I wrote that down. That Cable Matters. That looks like a great little box, and hopefully, if you like the Embedded Works idea and you got any questions, feel free to look me up, and I'll be happy to help you with getting that started too. If you're in the amateur radio and you watch the show, I can help you out with some of that stuff too. Anytime I can help out my brethren, I will. Love to do it.
Good. Thank you for that kind offer. Now, the other thing I want to point out about this is it's so lightweight and small. It just slips right into your backpack and bag, wherever you carry stuff. So it's smaller than carrying a separate Ethernet switch and a wall wart, which is what a lot of us have done for years. We got to go. Big thanks to Brett Gibson, and big thanks to Suncast, our producer for the show. Really appreciate you, Suncast, putting the show together for us. And we got to go. Hey, next couple of weeks, I'm going to be in Spain. So we've got, I got one show scheduled, going to try to get the other shows scheduled as quickly as possible. So we'll be in Spain. We'll be doing upcoming shows from, let's see, I think we're doing one from Mississippi, maybe from the SBE NS workshop at the Mississippi Broadcasters. And I think we're doing one from Madison, Wisconsin coming up too, from the show that they do there, the Broadcasters Clinic. We got to go. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.